Matthew Carter was a man seemingly at the pinnacle of success. At just 32, he was the celebrated host of Conversations with Carter, a talk show that boasted millions of viewers and featured the world's most influential figures. His sharp wit, designer suits, and curated social media presence created an image of a man who had everything under control. Yet behind the glitz and glamour, Matthew felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. Every day was a race to outperform, to stay relevant, and to fulfill the expectations of a world that never stopped watching. He rarely paused to reflect or connect, caught in a whirlwind of deadlines, scripts, and fleeting moments of applause. A fateful encounter. One bright afternoon in Los Angeles, the streets bustled with life as Matthew sped through the city in his sleek convertible. His mind raced faster than his car. He was running late for a live taping of his show. His assistant had texted about a last-minute change in the lineup, and his stomach growled in protest at the lunch he had skipped. As he pulled up to a red light, a realization struck him. He had run out of his signature peppermint mints. These weren't just mints. They were part of his on-screen persona, a ritual he clung to before every show. Spotting a small grocery store on the corner, Matthew sighed and veered into the parking lot, his impatience visible as he parked his car across 2 spaces. Inside, the store was modest but tidy. The soft hum of an old air conditioner filled the space, and the faint scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air. As Matthew approached the checkout counter with his mints in hand, his gaze fell on an elderly woman standing ahead of him. She was small and frail, her silver hair loosely tied back, wearing a well-worn cardigan over a faded floral dress. In her hands, she clutched a single loaf of bread. Her voice was soft but strained as she spoke to the cashier, a young woman whose name tag read Samantha. "Please," the elderly woman pleaded, her voice trembling. "I promise I'll come back tomorrow to pay. My son is sending me some money. Just this one loaf, please." Samantha looked at her apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's against store policy. I wish I could help, but I can't." Matthew checked his watch, his irritation growing. He had no time for delays, and yet something about the scene held his attention. The old woman turned to him, her face a mixture of desperation and shame. "I'm so sorry to hold you up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew sighed, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crisp $20 bill. Without a word, he handed it to Samantha. "Here," he said brusquely. "This should cover the bread. Keep the change." The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Matthew offered her a curt nod, grabbed his mints, and left the store without another word. He didn't want to linger in the moment. It was a distraction, an interruption in his meticulously scheduled day. The ripple effect of kindness. To Matthew, the gesture was fleeting, almost forgettable. But for Evelyn Harper, the elderly woman, it was a lifeline. Evelyn lived alone in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her husband had passed away years ago, and her only son, a struggling freelance artist in another state, could barely make ends meet himself. Evelyn's days were marked by solitude and struggle. Her pension was barely enough to cover rent and utilities, let alone groceries. That evening, as Evelyn sliced the loaf of bread for her dinner, she thought about the stranger who had come to her aid. In her heart, she felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that, despite her hardships, there were still good people in the world. Inspired, she decided to find a way to thank him. Though she had little to give, Evelyn turned to the one thing she had always loved, baking. The next morning, she rose early, kneading dough in her small kitchen and humming a tune she used to sing to her son. By afternoon, she had a warm loaf of bread wrapped carefully in parchment paper and tied with a piece of twine. An unexpected gift. A week later, Matthew found himself in the middle of another hectic day. As he returned to his car after a long meeting, he noticed something tucked under his windshield wiper. At first, he thought it was a parking ticket, but as he unfolded the blue envelope, he found a handwritten note. "Dear Sir, your kindness last week meant more to me than words can express. I don't have much, but I baked this loaf of bread as a small token of my gratitude. Thank you for reminding me that there is still kindness in the world, Evelyn." Next to the note was a neatly wrapped loaf of bread. Matthew stared at it, caught off guard by the gesture. He hadn't thought much about the encounter since it happened, Yet, here was this woman, going out of her way to show her gratitude. It was humbling. That night, as Matthew sat in his spacious apartment, he sliced the bread and took a bite. It was soft, warm, and comforting in a way he hadn't experienced in years. It reminded him of his childhood, of simpler times when his mother would bake bread in their tiny kitchen, while his father whistled cheerful tunes. For the first time in what felt like forever, Matthew allowed himself to slow down, to savor the moment. A connection rekindled. Unable to shake the memory of Evelyn's note, Matthew decided to visit the grocery store again the following week. He wanted to thank her personally and learn more about the woman who had touched his heart with such a simple act. When he arrived, Evelyn was there, chatting with Samantha at the register. Matthew approached her with a warm smile. "Evelyn," he said, "I just wanted to thank you for the bread. It was incredible." Evelyn's face lit up with surprise and delight. "Oh, it's you," she exclaimed. "I wasn't sure you'd even get the note." They ended up sitting on a bench outside the store, talking for hours. Evelyn shared stories of her life, how she had met her husband, the joy of raising her son, and the struggles she faced after losing her partner. Matthew, in turn, opened up about his life in the spotlight and the loneliness that often accompanied his success. By the end of their conversation, Matthew felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Evelyn's warmth and wisdom had touched something deep within him, reminding him of the values he had lost sight of in his pursuit of fame and fortune. A changed perspective. That single encounter became the catalyst for profound change in Matthew's life. He began volunteering at local shelters, using his platform to raise awareness for the struggles faced by the elderly and the homeless. Though his career continued to thrive, Matthew made a conscious effort to slow down and reconnect with the world around him. For Evelyn, the friendship she formed with Matthew brought new joy to her days. They continued to meet regularly, sharing stories, laughter, and homemade bread. The lesson. This story is a testament to the power of small acts of kindness. A $20 bill and a loaf of bread. Simple gestures that created a ripple effect, transforming two lives in ways neither could have anticipated. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to share it with others. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories 365 for more inspiring tales that celebrate the beauty of human connection. Together, we can spread hope and kindness, one story at a time.